Okay, we just finished the corporations and other organizations. Look, we're going to shift gears to the labor force and issues related to them, economically speaking. So, the big questions for the labor force is, what do economists mean when they say labor force? Who are they talking about? What are the current trends in labor wages and benefits in the United States economy? Okay, so the Bureau of Labor Statistics, they are a unit in the Department of Labor, and they track all kinds of information on employment in America. For economic purposes, all non military people who are employed or unemployed are considered to be of the labor force. Of course, our military personnel are working, but they're just not counted as available for the main labor sector that economists count because they're considered separate entities. Okay, so here you see a variety of different workers. You got office people, you got a nurse, you got a construction worker, etc., fireman, business person. It's like maybe a teacher or two, doctor, etc. All right, who constitutes the labor force? As far as unemployed members of the labor force, you have to be 16 years or older, or we don't expect you to work. You have to work 1 hour for pay within the last week, or 15 hours without pay in a family business. Sometimes when you're working for the family, you end up having to put in more hours of free work. You have to have a job, but maybe you didn't work because of illness, vacations, or etc. You may be still part of the labor force if you're currently unemployed, uh, uh, meaning you don't work an hour, 15 hours, or you're not ill or on vacation, etc. But you're just temporarily out of the workforce. You're not permanently out of the workforce. Basically, you got fired, or you're going into school, or there's some other reason why you're temporarily choosing not to work, or the market just gets tough based on what you do. Basically, you need to have looked for work in the last week, if you 4 weeks, and if you basically look for work in the last month, you are still part of the labor force, and especially if you're just temporarily unemployed, because there has to be a time for people to transition between certain jobs, and so they give you 4 weeks. Although I tip it cost it took me 8 weeks to find a new job when I was between jobs one time because I was overqualified for a bunch of things and not qualified for others. So it was kind of frustrating. Uh, if you're out of the labor force, you're not unemployed, you're not employed, you're just for some reason out of the workforce. If you're a discouraged worker, that's someone that wants work, but that you've decided to stop looking for a job. Whether you said it or not, you've given up looking for a job. If you get to that point, you're pretty frustrated. So try not to judge those people. They didn't. They tried to find a job. They just couldn't find anything that fit them. A lot of people have looked for work. Some of those people are really well qualified too. Some of them might be better than people doing the current job. You don't know. So try not to judge. All right. A couple of follow up questions to consider when analyzing this. I think should be bigger, and I teach the class. So if I think something should happen, I should make it happen, right? I don't know what Nonino is. I'm just going to make this Calibri, but I'm going to make it uniformly bigger. I have no idea why it's not even, but I don't like it. So I'm going to change it. Oh, I know what's happening. This is center aligned. I want it left aligned. And I'm in control of my dock so I can easily fix it. There we go. All right. So where are we at? Sorry to mess with the slideshow. Uh, if you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics definitions for employment and unemployment, why might unemployment percentages be inaccurate? Because people are fudging that they've really looked for work. or they might have like looked but not intended to really get the job, or they might have purposely blew an interview or messed up their resume because they don't really want a job. What if they look for a job and quit looking? Well, then they are not part of the labor force and they're considered discouraged, and they're not the ones that we're counting. But if you're like legit still looking, you're one of the people still working. Um, and people are embarrassed when they're not working. So even if they're unemployed, they might not admit to being unemployed. I know that's another sad thing, but it happens. All right, this one seems really small again. So what I'm going to do is make it bigger because it's my class. And if I don't like something, I should probably fix it. So this is me fixing it. All right. Sometimes when you fix things, you actually make them worse. This is sort of the case, but I'll fix it. So you have a natural unemployment rate because people are going in and out of the military. People are transitioning from one job to another, as the case may be. As a result, you just get this natural group of people that are not going to be unemployed, statistically speaking, over the long run, but naturally unemployed in the short term. Okay. So, what are we talking about here numbers wise? Well, usually the national standard unemployment rate, ideally, is between 5 and 6%. But if you're in that 5 to 6%, you're not happy because you don't want to be unemployed because you need the money. A 0% unemployment rate, though, is not really possible because you need time between assignments, typically. Though some people go from one job directly to another one, or they might take a leave of absence or go on vacation and then start a new job. That's the exception, though, not the rule. Most people are out of work for a time. I was out of work for a time, and then I got two job offers. I was out of work for another time, and I got three job offers. Sometimes the offers come faster, but in my experience, they tend to all come at once. And the more good attempts you make, the more likely you are to hit on finding employment. Frictional unemployment. That's when workers spend time looking for a job that suits their skills and interests. This tends to be short term if you're highly qualified because you're going to get hired. Structural unemployment is there's fewer jobs than workers. So um, basically, they've trained more people than they have a need for. Uh, this is not the case in certain uh, sectors like teachers and nurses. There's actually a shortage, structural under. We don't have enough in people. There's a shortage of teachers, shortage of nurses. But if the businesses closes, someone leaves the country, there's poor economic conditions, you might have fewer jobs than workers for a short time, especially like in services and retail sector here in America. During the pandemic, we had some structural unemployment. Some of it was short term, some of it was long term. It kind of depended if a company could hold on. Let's look at the visual. I can't make much out of that, so we need to go in up close and bigger view. There it goes, kicks in. This is going to be the unemployment rate. So we said between 5 and 6 is standard. So if you're below this, you have pretty low unemployment. But if you're above it, you have somewhat high unemployment. It's kind of high in the 60s, late 70s, really high in the 80s, high in the early 90s, high in 2003, 2 to 2003. But it's really low in 2000, 1990, 1980, 1975, 1970, 1965, and probably something was happening in America at that time. What's the percentage of labor force by age group? The biggest people employed are in that 35 to 54 age group in 2004. But by 2014, you have a much higher population of people over 55 working. and people 25 to 34 working. Occupational trends. There's been a trend towards more people in the service jobs. Farming used to be the trend, but now it's computer chips since the late 1900s. Let's kind of go back to the slideshow. By the way, computer chips started getting smaller and smaller due to space travel. But there's also fewer goods being produced and more services. So that meant a shift from manufacturing to service economy. It kind of became inevitable. Service jobs were increasing, manufacturing jobs were lost, and demand for skilled labor was increasing. When you're talking skilled labor, you're talking plumber, electrician, welder, that kind of thing. The supply of skilled labor had to increase to meet the demand for more skilled labor. And then you had international competition, where you needed cheap labor, tended to get sent outside of country. Like that's often why when you call a call center for support for technical, you'll hear someone with an accent because it's outsourced outside of America. Not always, but sometimes. Offshoring. Sometimes you move an entire operation out of country. Like Japan moved, I don't know, I think Nissan opened a factory here. Uh, but when you're moving an entire operation to another country, not your own, it's considered offshoring. And you could see that you might find cheaper labor, so that could motivate such change. The next one. So, as the labor force was changing, college grads were seeking jobs, and that's known as the learning effect. That's a theory that states that as people learn more, they're going to get higher wages because they're competent to do more complicated jobs, and because it's more complicated, it's worth more compensation. Then you get a screening effect. This theory suggests that completion of college shows intelligence and ability to work hard. And if you are intelligent and able to work hard, then you can learn the new job. But generally speaking, the more education you have, the higher your income. You can look at the BLS statistics. There is a high correlation between education and income. If you want to have more money in your life, have more school in your life. It's a real simple correlation. About 38% of all women worked in 1960. But by 1995, there's a 20% increase to 58% of all women working. But it's even a larger percentage today. Look at the chart and find out. 2006. Let's look at age. People participating in the labor force with less than a high school degree are 46%. People with a high school diploma, they're 62.5%. With some college or associate degree, 72.5%. With the bachelor's degree or more, it's up to 78%. So you have a huge increase of employment based on education. Now, as far as race goes, that's a factor too on employment levels. Here, the white male is the highest participant, race and gender. The white female, much less so, 59.7%. The black male is much higher than the white female and the black female. But there's definitely a higher percentage of black females in the labor force than white females, according to these statistics. Temporary employment. Contingent employment is temporary, it's part time. Consider working at a Christmas tree lot. You're only going to do that during Christmas time. These temporary employees offer the following benefits: Flexible working arrangements. They know the job is not going to last forever, and yet they'll still want to do the work. They're easy to fire or let go when the season's over because they know it's only going to last so long. And they're paid less, and they get less benefits, and they expect it because they're not a full time employee. They don't expect higher pay, or do they get one? Some employees prefer temporary work because they like to be flexible. I'll work around Christmas to make some more for gifts for the grandkids. Trends in wages and benefits. Generally speaking, earnings can be up and down. Workers with college degrees, earnings tend to be up. If you're without a college degree, your earnings tend to be down. If your average weekly earning in the US was down from $275 in 1980 to $271 in 1999. So, with adjusted dollars for inflation. Always got to adjust for inflation if you're going to really compare correctly, because the value of dollars change over time. That's what inflation is. Cost of benefits rising. Benefits make up to 28% of compensation. So if they're covering medical, dental, that takes a big portion of your earned income. And there's rising benefits that cost employers and decrease profits and affects people's quality of life. All right, let's see if we can do the quiz. Then I'm going to call it quits on this video. I'll make a new one for the last section. So, what do economists mean by the term labor force? Economists define labor force as someone employed a certain number of hours. And an unemployed person who is only temporarily unemployed. That's the gist of it. Let's go back and look at the answer a little bit. Employed, years or old, an hour, blah, blah, blah. Temporarily out of work. I get the gist of it. Economics? No, economists. Find labor force is someone employed a certain number of hours, and unemployed was only temporary. +year-old who's employed a certain number of hours. To add a little detail if you see it. Current trends in labor are workers with more education make more money and earn more than women, and people of color earn less than whites, and benefits take a significant chunk of income. Go ahead and get rid of this clear and. I think that's the gist of what that was about. And I think that's a good place to pause. I know this video is going to be a little shorter, but that's okay. They all don't have to be super long to get the point across. So we're going to end it here. Thanks for watching. Peace. Let's end deliberation.